Am I audible?
Yes, Gurdeep.
Okay.
Very much.
So last week we read that chapter, Do Not Live to Satisfy Expectations of Others. And there was a conversation between the youth and the philosopher. And at the end, the youth got irritated and like when the philosopher was saying there is we should not live to meet others people expectation, we should not seek validation, we should not seek recognition. So the youth got irritated and he mentioned that there should be a separation of task. So youth was confused, what is this separation of task all about? And now this is we are entering into this chapter, that is how to separate task. So over to you, philosopher.
So we begin with how to separate tasks. Say there's a child who has a hard time studying. He doesn't pay attention in class, doesn't do his homework, and even leaves his books at school. Now, what would you do if you were his father?
Well, of course, I would try everything I could think of to get him to apply himself. I would hire tutors and make him go to study center, even if I had to pull him by the ear to get him there. I would say that's a parent's duty. And that's actually how I was raised myself. I wasn't allowed to eat dinner until the day's homework was done.
Then, let me ask another question. Did you learn to enjoy studying as a result of being made to do it in such a heavy handed manner?
Unfortunately, I didn't. I just took care of my studies for school and for exams in a routine way.
I see. All right. I will talk about this from the basic stance of Adlerian psychology. When one is confronted with the task of studying, for instance, in Adlerian psychology, we consider it from the perspective of whose task is this?
Whose task?
You need to scroll down. Whether the child studies or not, whether he goes out and plays with his friends or not. Essentially, this is the child's task, not the parent's task.
Do you mean that it is something the child is supposed to do?
Simply put, yes. There would be no point if the parent studied instead of the child, would there?
Well, no, there wouldn't.
Studying is the child's task. A parent's handling of that by commanding the child to study is, in effect, an act of intruding on another person's task. One is unlikely to avert a collision in this way. We need to think with a perspective of whose task is this and continually separate one's own task from other people's tasks.
How does one go about separating them?
One does not intrude on other people's tasks, that's all.
That's all?
In general, all interpersonal relationship troubles are caused by intruding on other people's tasks or having one's own task intruded on. Carrying out the separation of tasks is enough to change one's interpersonal relationships dramatically.
Hmm, I don't really get it. In the first place, how can you tell whose task it is? From my point of, just a second.
You got it right. My point of view, it
Yeah,
starts with view. Says view on top, left top.
just a second. It's not visible to me. From my point of view, realistically speaking, getting one's child to study is the duty of parents because almost no child studies just out of enjoyment. And after all is said and done, the parent isn't child's guardian.
There is a simple way to tell whose task it is. Think who ultimately is going to receive the end result brought about by the choice that is made. When the child has made the choice of not studying, Ultimately, the end result of that decision, not being able to keep up in class or get into the preferred school, for instance, does not have to be received by the parents. Clearly, it is the child who has to receive it. In other words, studying is the child's task.
No, no, you're completely wrong. The parent, who is more experienced in life and also acts as a guardian, has the responsibility to urge the child to study so such situations do not arise. This is something done for the good of the child and is not an act of intruding. While studying may be the child's task, getting the child to study is the parent's task.
It's true that one often hears parents today using the phrase, it's for your own good, but they are clearly doing so in order to fulfill their own goals, which could be their appearance in the eyes of society. They need to put on airs or their desire for control. For example, in other words, it's not for your own good, but for the parents. And it is because the child senses this deception that he rebels.
So, even if the child hasn't been studying at all, you are saying that since it's his task, I should just let him be?
One has to pay attention. Adlerian psychology does not recommend the non interference approach. Non interference is the attitude of not knowing and not even being interested in knowing what the child is doing. Instead, what the child is doing, that one, but one tells the child that that one is ready to assist him whenever he has the urge to study. But one must not intrude on the child's task. When no requests are being made, it does not do to meddle in things.
Does this go beyond parent child relationships?
Yes, of course. In Adlerian psychology, counseling, for instance, we do not think of the clients changing or not changing as the task of the counselor.
What are you saying here?
As a result of having received counseling, what kind of resolution does the client make to change his lifestyle or not? This is the client's task, and the counselor cannot intervene.
No way, I can't accept such an irresponsible attitude.
Naturally, one gives all the assistance one possibly can, but beyond that, one doesn't intrude. There's a saying that goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Please think of counseling and all other assistance provided to other people in Adlerian psychology as having that kind of stance. Forcing change while ignoring the person's intention will only lead to an intense reaction.
The counselor does not change the client's life.
You are the only one who can change yourself. So I think we can stop here and reflect for a while. I think this is the major reason of tug of war between the parents and the children, teachers and the students. That being the elders, parents and teachers, they actually think it is their responsibility to guide, to mentor their children and the students. But according to Adlerian psychology, it is a kind of we are intruding upon child's right. So what do others have to say about this?
We have two young people, we can see how they feel. We have Khushi and Harshita. When we intrude on your rights, how does it feel?
So good evening, everybody. So as you guys are asking that how do we feel when the parents or the teachers intrude in our studies or in our lives. So basically, uh, sometimes we need your guidance and your your knowledge and to do good in life. But not every time your intrude in our life is necessary. Like sometimes we feel that you guys are doing too much, something like that.
Okay, so we should know our boundaries as well.
Yeah.
But if we do not check, or if we do not guide our children or students, doesn't it come across as being in irresponsible teacher or a parent? Because majority of us as parents do this only what the youth is saying.
So
Yes, we need.
basically, what I
Yes,
you
Khushi,
can
you're saying
yes,
something?
Khushi, you can speak. I can speak later.
Yes, I was just saying, as you said, that everything should have the boundaries, just like that.
Yes, Harshita, over to you. You were saying something.
Yes, ma'am. My point is that instead of being parents, instead of making it sound like we are pushing them into something or intruding into their things and everything, we can come up in a way that we're just checking up on them, that how they are feeling after doing a certain thing, or like how's their progress, or like do they feel good about it. So we can make it happen that ways.
Mm.
So we can check the progress and make to try to understand them, that how they're feeling after doing a certain thing, or how they're feeling after studying a certain subject, that ways, so that we can understand the children also better.
Yes, totally agree with you. Totally agree. I think we should know, like, as an educator or as a parent, we should know when to draw the line. That is important.
Perfect. So we can move to the next chapter.
Discard other people's task. Then, what about with shut-ins, for example? I mean, with someone like my friend. Even then, would you say it's the separation of task, don't intervene, and it has no connection to the parents?
Can he break out of the shut-in situation or not? Or in what way can he break out of it? In principle, this is a task that the person has to resolve himself. It's not for the parents to intervene. Nevertheless, as they are not complete strangers, some form of assistance is probably needed. At this point, the most important thing is whether the child feels he can consult frankly with his parents when he's experiencing a dilemma, and whether they have been building enough of a trust relationship on a regular basis.
Then, supposing your own child had shut himself in, what would you do? Please answer this not as a philosopher, but as a parent.
First, I myself would think this is the child's task. I would try not to intervene in his shut in situation, and I would refrain from focusing too much attention on it. Then I would send a message to him to the effect that I'm ready to assist him whenever he is in need. In that way, the child, having sensed a change in his parent, will have no choice but to make it his own task to think about what he should do. He'll probably come and ask for assistance, and he'll probably try to work some things out on his own.
Would you really manage to be so cut and dried if it were your own child who would become a shut-in?
A parent suffering over the relationship with his or her child will tend to think, my child is my life. In other words, the parent is taking on the child's task as his or her own. and is no longer able to think about anything but the child. When at last the parent notices it, the I is already gone from his or her life. However, no matter how much of the burden of the child's task one carries, the child is still an independent individual. Children do not become what their parents want them to become in their choice of university, place of employment, and partner in marriage, and even in the everyday subtleties of speech and conduct. They do not act according to their parents' wishes. Naturally, the parents will worry about them and probably want to intervene at times. But as I said earlier, other people are not living to satisfy your expectation. Though the child is one's own, he or she is not living to satisfy one's expectations as a parent.
So you have to draw the line even with the family.
Actually, with families, there is less distance, so it's all the more necessary to consciously separate the tasks.
That doesn't make sense. On the one hand, you are talking about love, and on the other, you are denying it. If you draw the line between yourself and other people that way, you won't be able to believe in anyone anymore.
Look, the act of believing is also the separation of tasks. You believe in your partner, that is your task. But how that person acts with regard to your expectations and trust is other people's task. When you push your wishes without having drawn that line, before you know it, you are engaging in stalker like intervention. Supposing your partner did not act as you had wished, would you still be able to believe in that person? Would you still be able to love that person? The task of love that Adler speaks of is comprised of such questions.
That's difficult. That's very difficult.
Of course, it is. But think about it this way: intervening in other people's tasks and taking on other people's tasks turns one's life into something heavy and full of hardship. If you are leading a life of worry and suffering, which stems from interpersonal relationships, first learn the boundary of from here on, that is not my task, and discard other people's tasks. That is the first step toward lightening the load and making life simpler.
How to rid yourself of interpersonal relationship problems? I don't know. It just doesn't sit right with me.
Then let's envision a scene in which your parents are vehemently opposing your choice of place of employment. They were, in fact, against it, weren't they?
Yes, they were. I wouldn't go so far as saying they were vehemently opposed, but they did make various snide remarks.
Well, let's exaggerate it and say they were vehemently opposed. Your father was ranting and raving with emotion, and your mother was protesting your decision with tears in her eyes. They absolutely do not approve of you becoming a librarian. And if you will not take on the family business like your brother has, they may very well disown you. But how to come to terms with the emotion of not approving is your parents' task, not yours. It's not a problem for you to worry about.
Now, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Are you saying that it doesn't matter how sad I make my parents feel?
That's right. It doesn't matter.
You have got to be joking. Could there be such a thing as a philosophy that recommends unfilial behavior?
All you can do with regard to your own life is choose the best path that you believe in. On the other hand, what kind of judgment do other people pass on that choice? That is the task of other people. and it's not a matter you can do anything about.
What another person thinks of you, if they like you or dislike you, that is that person's task, not mine. Is that what you are saying?
That is what separating is. You're worried about other people looking at you. You're worried about being judged by other people. That is why you're constantly craving recognition from others. Now, why are you worried about other people looking at you anyway? Adlerian psychology has an easy answer. You haven't done the separation of tasks yet. You assume that even things that should be other people's tasks are your own. Remember the words of the grandmother? You are the only one who's worried how you look. Her remark drives right to the heart of the separation of tasks. What other people think when they see your face, that is the task of other people, and is not something you have any control over.
As theory, I get it. To my reasoning brain, it does make sense. But my emotions can't keep up with such a high handed argument.
Then let's try another tack. Say there's a man who's distressed about the interpersonal relationships at the company where he works. He has a completely irrational boss who yells at him at every opportunity, no matter how hard he tries. His boss doesn't acknowledge his efforts and never even really listens to what he says.
That sounds exactly like my boss.
But is being acknowledged by your boss work that you should think of as top priority? It isn't your job to be liked by people at the place you work. Your boss doesn't like you, and his reasons for not liking you are clearly unreasonable. But in that case, there's no need for you to get cozy with him.
That sounds right. But the person is my boss, right? I won't get any work done if I'm shunned by my direct superior.
That is Adler's life lie again. I can't do my work because I have been shunned by my boss. It's the boss's fault that my work isn't going well. The person who says such things is bringing up the existence of the boss as an excuse for the work that doesn't go well, much like the female student with the fear of blushing. It's actually what you need, the existence of an awful boss. Because then you can say, if only I didn't have this boss, I could get more work done.
No, you don't know my relationship with my boss. I wish you would stop making arbitrary guesses.
This is a discussion that is concerned with the fundamentals of Adlerian psychology. If you're angry, nothing will sink in. You think, I have got that boss, so I can't work. This is complete etiology, but it's really, I don't want to work, so I'll create an awful boss. Or I don't want to acknowledge my incapable self, so I'll create an awful boss. That would be the teleological way of looking at it.
That's probably how it would be framed in your stock teleology approach, but in my case, it's different.
Then, supposing you had done the separation of tasks, how would things be? In other words, no matter how much your boss tries to vent his unreasonable anger at you, that is not your task. The unreasonable emotions are tasks for your boss to deal with himself. There is no need to cozy up to him or to yield to him to the point of bowing down. You should think what I should do is face my own task in my own life without lying.
But that's
We are all suffering in interpersonal relationships. It might be the relationship with one's parent or one's elder brother, and it might be the interpersonal relationships at one's workplace. Now, last time, you were saying that you wanted some specific steps. This is what I propose. First, one should ask whose task is this? Then, do the separation of tasks. Calmly delineate up to what point one's own tasks go and from what point they become another person's task. And do not intervene in other people's tasks or allow even a single person to intervene in one's own task. This is a specific and revolutionary viewpoint that is unique to Adlerian psychology and contains the potential to utterly change one's interpersonal relationship problems.
I'm starting to see what you meant when you said that the topic of today's discussion was freedom.
That's right. We are trying to talk about freedom now. So here, Gurdeep, I think we can take a kind of a reflection.
Yes, yes.
So if anybody has to share anything here regarding the boss and the junior relationship.
I'm sure plenty will be here on this topic.
Superior and subordinate relationship.
Yeah.
It's very tricky and complex.
That's what the competitive world is about. I mean, we're not in a collaborative phase, so we'll always end up with these challenges.
Yes.
We have Harshita, we have Khushi, we have Meenakshi. Meenakshi, you want to add something to that?
No, the same thing that you said. We all are facing a lot of issues when it comes to superior and subordinate position. We all do, and it's a top. I think something that we need to work upon.
And moreover, sir, it is both ways. Like if the boss is cooperative, maybe the juniors may not be all that, may not be so, what do you say, prompt.
See, if the boss is very cooperative, nobody is going to believe that he's that cooperative. They're going to say, "Oh, no, he could be more cooperative." It's a never-ending thing. Okay, and if the junior is, you know, very collaborative in a way and everything, it will always not be enough. It will always be keep
Yeah,
the person.
Meenakshi ma'am, yeah, I want to add here, say for example, if boss is very cooperative and collaborative in approach, then subordinate, they take boss for granted, isn't
That is
it?
what I'm saying. So that it's a never-ending cycle.
Yes.
So no amount of cooperative boss will be cooperative enough. I mean, it doesn't matter, and the same applies to the employee as well. The more you do, the more people sort of want from you. It's always like that.
Love
And
and hate, love and hate relationship.
if the boss is too bossy, nobody likes him. Okay, and the employee is too demanding, nobody likes the subordinate is too demanding, nobody likes him or her. So this is the balance is very difficult to get to. People may say the boss is very nice. Oh, he's very nice. He's very sweet and all those things. But then sooner or later they'll say, oh, but then he could have done something over here, or she could have done something over there. A little more. How could
It's
he?
a natural tendency of human beings that we always judge.
It's always there. I mean, even with the parents, we do the same. With our children, we do the same. It's
So
always,
judgment is always there.
yeah, that is the way the society is. And it's not going to change. It's going
Manisha is
to,
saying Tom and Jerry.
yeah, Tom and Jerry too.
And the cheese story, the comic about the cheese, how they keep grabbing the cheese.
So the other day also in I don't remember which book. I know that was with Manu with Mr.
Manu
Uh,
Kapoor.
saying on the Sunday this thing Guru Nanak's. So we were talking
Amardeep
about
Singh.
Deep
The,
Singh.
the Guru Chela relationship which you described in the last session.
So, and also about the fact that there's no equality. We can never become equals. Okay, there will always be a gap. Okay, no matter how much we try. Okay, because that is the way our brain works. So, I mean, certain things in life cannot really change, but we do want it to change. but we know that it is not going to change, sort of thing. No, we can keep working towards it.
But
Okay,
at least we can change our approach towards it.
so that's what we are working on. But
That's we are working on, and that's why we are reading this book.
that's why we're reading this book, and we talk about equality and non-judgmental attitude and all those things. But it's not really going to work, because there is a difference. There are differences between humans. That's the way God has meant it. Okay, that's why we are born into different segments of the society. We're not all equal. That's how we are born. So how can we change that? No matter how much of economic equality and all these things we try to bring about, there will be differences um, in our approach to things, our talents, and so many other things. Okay, so how can we change that? I can speak very well, but I can't draw very well. So there is a difference. So that difference will always be there, and as long as difference is there, I may be somebody may be born to a very rich family, and somebody may be born to a very poor family. There are few people who are poor who make it and become very rich, like Dhirubhai Ambani and all those things. Even if I don't know how poor he was, but definitely he became very rich, right? But not everybody from a, a poor or a middle class background becomes very rich. Okay, so those differences are there, and then people feel like, why me? Okay, why didn't God give me enough? So that's always there. So, but yeah, we'll nurture these ideas of equality, and we try to reach there. We try to treat people equally, and that is what is important, I think.
And even in Gita, it is said, no, so you keep on doing your work, do not expect for any kind of results and fruit. So either the boss likes you or not, or appreciates or recognizes your work. It should not matter, and a person should continue doing the good.
That again, yes, Gita says so. But is there any way you can stop doing your work just because your boss doesn't like you? You have
Yeah,
to.
yeah, that is what I'm saying. So do not expect any kind of recognition or appreciation. So one
Yeah.
should do his or her own duty without fail.
Yeah, so we just continue doing whatever it is. So
And that's
that's
why we suffer. When we have expectations, we suffer. So
but
continue doing your work.
can you stop having expectations?
That's we are trying to do.
That's what we are trying to do, but it doesn't happen. No matter how long it is and whom it is with. I love saying that I don't have any expectations from my daughter, but if I look deep down inside, somewhere some expectation is there, right? So that is there.
Okay, I think it's never ending
So it is like it's very
discussion.
difficult to be completely detached from your from interpersonal relationships. This is what I feel. It is really very difficult, daunting task to
Then
become
again,
detached.
all problems are interpersonal problems only.
Correct.
Khushi has raised her hand.
Yeah, so I don't have a boss, but I have teachers as boss in my schools. So while this chapter was going on, I was just thinking some tasks are given to us as students, and my like all am given some tasks. So we try to do our best, but deep down we also think that may our teacher help us. Like we don't say that, but deep down we really want that to happen. But sometimes it appears to be teachers like, oh, I didn't help you guys, but you guys did so well. But deep down we really wanted to get some of her help. And sometimes we say that we don't need your help to our parents and our teachers, but
But
it's
Khushi, yeah,
they should understand.
here separation of task is important. That is your task, not teacher's task, isn't it?
But sometimes we
She is just talking about her expectation. Okay, it's her task, but her expectation was that the teacher would help, and the teacher did not. So she was a little disappointed. That's it.
Uh,
Okay, about her.
so yeah, the important question is whose task is this? Like the philosopher is saying, we all should first identify whose task is this.
Yeah.
The task is ours, but we would need some mental help.
Support and guidance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what.
Cut the Gordian knot and it'll happen.
So this is an indication to continue with the chapter.
Okay. I'm
Yes.
sure, cut the Gordian knot. I'm sure that if one could understand the separation of task and put it into practice, one's interpersonal relationships would all at once become free. But I still can't accept it.
Go on. I'm listening.
I think that in theory, the separation of task is entirely right. What other people think of me or what sort of judgment they pass on me is the task of other people and is not something I can do anything about. And I should just do what I have to do in my life without lying. I would have no problem if you said that this is the life truth. That's how right I think it is. But consider this from an ethical or moral point of view, could it be said to be the right thing to do? That is to say, a way of living that draws boundaries between oneself and others. Because wouldn't you be brushing other people away and saying that's intervention? Whenever they were worried about you and asked how you are doing. It seems to me that this is something that treads on the goodwill of others.
Have you heard of the man known as Alexander the Great?
Alexander the Great, yes, I learned about him in world history.
He was a Macedonian king who lived in the 4th century before Christ. When he was advancing on the Persian kingdom of Lydia, he learnt of a chariot enshrined in Acropolis. The chariot had been secured tightly to a pillar in the temple by Gordias, the former king. And there was a local legend that said, "He who unravels this knot should be master of Asia." It was tightly wound knot that many men of skill had been certain that they could unbind. But no one had succeeded. Now, what do you think Alexander the Great did when he stood before this knot?
Well, didn't he unravel the legendary knot with ease and go on to become the ruler of Asia?
No, that's not how it happened. As soon as Alexander the Great saw how tight the knot was, he pulled out his sword and sliced it in half with one stroke.
Wow.
Then it is said that he declared, "Destiny is not something brought about a legend, but clearly away with one's own sword." He had no use for the power of legend and would forge his destiny with his sword. As you know, he then proceeded to become the great conqueror of all the territories of what is now the Middle East and Western Asia. This is the famous anecdote known as the Gordian knot. And so, such intricate knots, the bonds in our interpersonal relationships, are not to be unraveled by conventional methods, but must be severed by some completely new approach. Whenever I explain the separation of tasks, I always remember the Gordian knot.
Well, I don't mean to contradict you, but not everyone can become Alexander the Great. Isn't it precisely because there was no one else who could have cut the knot that the anecdote portraying it as a heroic deed is still conveyed to this day? It's exactly the same with separation of task. Even though one knows one can just cut through something with one sword, one might find it rather difficult. Because when one presses forward with the separation of task, in the end, one will have to cut ties with people. One will drive people into isolation. The separation of task you speak of completely ignores human emotion. How could one possibly build good interpersonal relationships with that?
One can build them. The separation of tasks is not the final objective for interpersonal relationships. Rather, it is the gateway.
The gateway?
For instance, when reading a book, if one brings one's face too close to it, one cannot see anything. In the same way, forming good interpersonal relationships requires a certain degree of distance. When the distance gets too small and people become stuck together, it becomes impossible to even speak to each other. But the distance must not be too great either. Parents who scold their children too much become mentally very distant. When this happens, the child can no longer even consult the parents, and the parents can no longer give the proper assistance. One should be ready to lend a hand when needed, but not encroach on the person's territory. It is important to maintain this kind of moderate distance.
Is distance necessary even in the kind of relationship that parents and children have?
Of course, earlier you said that the separation of tasks is something that treads on other person's goodwill. That is a notion that is tied to reward. It's the idea that when another person does something for you, you have to do something in return, even if that person does not want anything. Rather than responding to the goodwill, it is just being tied to reward. No matter what sort of appeal the other person might make, you are the only one who decides what you should do.
Reward is at the root of what I'm calling ties.
Yes, when reward is at the base of an interpersonal relationships, there's a feeling that wells up in one that says, I gave this much, so you should give me that much back. This is a notion that is quite different from separation of tasks. Of course, we must not seek reward and we must not be tied to it. However, there are certainly situations in which it would be easier to intervene in the task of another person without doing any separation of tasks. For instance, in a child raising situation, when a child is having a hard time tying his shoes for the busy mother, it is certainly faster to tie them than to wait for him to do it himself. But that is an intervention, and it is taking the child's task away from him. And as a result of repeating that intervention, the child will cease to learn anything and will lose the courage to face his life tasks. As Adler says, children who have not been taught to confront challenges will try to avoid all challenges.
But that is such a dry way of thinking.
When Alexander the Great cut the Gordian knot, there were probably those who felt the same way, that the unraveling of the knot by hand had meaning and that it was a mistake to cut it with a sword. That Alexander had misunderstood the meaning of Ork's word. In Adlerian psychology, there are aspects that are antithetical to normal social thinking. It denies etiology, denies trauma, and adopts teleology. It treats people's problem as interpersonal relationship problems. And the not seeking of recognition and the separation of tasks too are probably antithetical to normal social thinking.
Sandeep sir has raised his hand.
I'll read the closing of the chapter.
Okay. It's impossible. I can't do it.
Why? The youth was devastated by the separation of tasks that the philosopher had begun describing. When one thought of all one's problems as being in one's interpersonal relationships, the separation of tasks was effective. Just by having this viewpoint, the world would become quite simple. But there was no flesh and blood in it. It gave off no sense of one's warmth as a person. Could anyone accept such a philosophy? The youth rose from his chair and pleaded loudly. Sandeep sir
Uh,
wanted to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to read the last bit which you read. No problem. Carry on.
So, sir, you can do it.
No, no, no. Okay, I'll just read the last paragraph because I think it's important to reflect on it. It's worth a repeat. The youth was devastated by the separation of tasks that the philosopher had begun describing. When one thought of all one's problems as being in one's interpersonal relationships, the separation of tasks was effective. Just by having this viewpoint, the world would become quite simple, but there was no flesh and blood in it. It gave off no sense of one's warmth as a person. Could anyone accept such a philosophy? The youth rose from his chair and pleaded loudly. Thank you. It's a very powerful closing of a chapter if you actually reflect on it a little.
Desire for recognition makes you unfree. Look, I have been dissatisfied for ages. The adults of the world tell the young people, do something you like to do. And they do it with smiles on their faces, as if they might actually be understanding people, as if they were on the side of the young. But it's all lip service that only comes out because those young people are complete strangers to them. And the relationship is one that is completely without any kind of responsibility. Then, parents and teachers tell us, get into that school or look for a stable occupation. And this concrete and uninteresting instruction is not merely an intervention. It's actually that they are trying to fulfill their responsibilities. It's precisely because we are closely connected to them and they are seriously concerned about our future that they can't say irresponsible things like, do something you like. I'm sure you would put on that understanding face too and say to me, please do something you like. But I won't believe such a comment from another person. It's an extremely irresponsible comment, as if one were just brushing a caterpillar off one's shoulder. And if the world crushed that caterpillar, you would say, it's not my task. Just a second. And walk away nonchalantly. What separation of task, you monster?
Oh, goodness. You're getting all bent out of shape. So, what you are saying, in other words, is that you want someone to intervene to some extent? That you want another person to decide your path?
Sure, maybe I do. It's like this. It's not so difficult to judge what others expect of one or what kind of role is being demanded of one. Living as one likes, on the other hand, is extremely difficult. What does one want? What does one want to become? And what kind of life does one want to lead? One doesn't always get such a concrete idea of things. It would be a grave mistake to think that everyone has clear-cut dreams and objectives. Don't you know that?
Maybe it's easier to live in such a way as to satisfy other people's expectations because one is entrusting one's own life to them. For example, one runs along the tracks that one's parents have laid out, even if there are a lot of things one might object to. One will not lose one's way as long as one stays on those rails. But if one is deciding one's path oneself, it's only natural that one will get lost at times. One comes up against the wall of how one should live.
That is what I'm looking for recognition from others for. You were talking about God earlier. And if we were still living in an era when God was something people believed in, I suppose that God is watching might serve as a criterion for self discipline. If one were recognized by God, maybe one didn't need recognition from others. But that era ended a long time ago. And in that case, one has no choice but to discipline oneself on the basis that other people are watching, to aspire to be recognized by others and live an honest life. Other people's eyes are my guide.
Does one choose recognition from others, or does one choose a path of freedom without recognition? It's an important question. Let's think about it together. To live one's life trying to gauge other people's feelings and being worried about how they look at you. To live in such a way that others' wishes are granted. There may indeed be signposts to guide you this way, but it is very unfree way to live. Now, why are you choosing such an unfree way to live? You are using the term desire for recognition. But what you are really saying is that you don't want to be disliked by anyone.
Who does? There is no one anywhere who would go so far as to actually want to be disliked.
Exactly. It is true that there is no person who wishes to be disliked. But look at it this way. What should one do to not be disliked by anyone? There is only one answer. It is to constantly gauge other people's feelings while swearing loyalty to all of them. If there are 10 people, one must swear loyalty to all 10. When one does that, for the time being, one will have succeeded in not being disliked by anyone. But at this point, there is a great contradiction looming. One swears loyalty to all 10 people out of the single minded desire to not be disliked. This is like a politician who has fallen into populism and begun to make impossible promises and accept responsibilities that are beyond him. Naturally, his lies will come to light before long. He will lose people's trust and turn his own life into one of greater suffering. And of course, the stress of continuous lying has all kinds of consequences. Other people are, sorry, please grasp this point. If one is living in such a way as to satisfy other people's expectation and one is entrusting one's own life to others, that is a way of living in which one is lying to oneself and continuing that lying to include the people around him.
So, one should be egocentric and live however one pleases.
Separating one's task is not an egocentric thing. Intervening in other people's tasks is essentially an egocentric way of thinking. However, parents force their children to study, they meddle in their life and marriage choices. That is nothing other than an egocentric way of thinking.
So the child can just ignore his parents' intentions and live however he pleases.
There is no reason of any sort that one should not live one's life as one pleases.
Not only are you nihilist, you are an anarchist and hedonist to boot. I'm past being astonished, and now I'm going to start laughing any moment.
An adult who has chosen an unfree way to live, on seeing a young person living freely here and now in this moment. Criticizes the youth as being hedonistic, of course. This is a life lie that comes out so that the adult can accept his own unfree life. An adult who has chosen real freedom himself will not make such comments and will instead cheer on the will to be free.
All right. So, what are you maintaining is that freedom is the issue. Let's get to the main point. You have been using the word freedom a lot. But what does freedom mean to you anyway? How can we be free?
Let's put a bookmark. Yeah, it's 6:27. Let's discover freedom next time. We have with us some people. I just call out the names in case someone wants to say something. It's important. Yeah. There's a message in the chat in case you want to copy it. It'll give you access to takeaways from the section. You can copy and paste it on your device because after this chat, you will not be able to, after closing, you will not be able to copy it. So I'm giving you a moment to please copy that. Reflect on the concept of separation of tasks in one's own life. That's what Gurdeep. Consider the balance between maintaining boundaries and nurturing relationships in close interpersonal connections. This is the philosopher's view. And Meenakshi said, explore ways to communicate and collaborate with others without getting caught in the cycle of expectation and judgment. That's what Meenakshi was talking about. So there are three interesting takeaways from this meeting, three different perspectives. If you hold on to this link and open it, it'll open in a AI assisted chat called Otter. So this is a subscription facility. I wonder how people have perhaps not understood that we survive on a whole lot of these AI tools. And we are using AI tools the real digital way as we can. Our entire production of video is with the help of AI. Our entire notes are produced by AI. So what I'm trying to explain to teachers is that you can use AI very, very effectively in your class. So when you concentrate on your reading, it's hard sometimes to capture these nuggets which have come on the screen on the right side. So I hope you'll get to use them. Shalu, yeah, she agreed to the discussion that was happening. So when this chat opens, it gives you where the chat is, and when the chat closes, it gives you a takeaway. This is a facility called Otter.ai. It's a free facility for I think about 30 minutes, and beyond that, you have to pay a subscription. We have a subscription plan, so that's why we're able to give you much more than that. I thought I'd introduce this tool to you in this session before we go. Gurdeep, have you taken a screenshot of the bookmark? Yeah, just take it from your Kindle and put it in the WhatsApp, please. And maybe you can copy this takeaways from the meeting and put them in the WhatsApp also. Can you do that, please? Harshita, you want to say something? Khushi, thank you so much. You want to add something more? Thank you, Meenakshi. Shalu, you want to add something? Some message from Sunbeam Schools?
Jain sir.
Jai Hind ji.
Sir, I don't have any as such message, but I'll just take Khushi's thought what she said that sometimes we need help. So I totally agree that somewhere students need scaffolding that we should provide. That's it.
Yeah. I'm a believer that provide scaffolding, but don't lead. And if you look
Yes,
at the way
sir.
experiential learning goes, or whichever way we are talking today, whether it's the IB method or whether what the NEP says or what productive failure says. I mean, in this chapter itself, there was a fair amount of reflection of productive failure.
Yes,
And I
sir. Sir,
suggest when you get
yes.
time, perhaps a lot of you have done the productive failure exercise. It may be a good idea to read a little about it to add to your reflections. So reflections are welcome. Please feel free to write in the WhatsApp. Please feel free to send us a reflection. We'll be happy to post it for you. Anyone else wants to add anything? Shalini, over to you to close.
So what I would like to say is that we need some kind of space in all kind of relationship, be it children and the parents or students and the teachers, because that space allows a person to experiment. Maybe while experimentation, a person might fail, but will also learn in the process. So what we talked about in productive failure last time, it is experiential learning is the need of today, be it schools or be it parent-child relationship. So what I feel is at times parents try to teach or try to decide the path for their children so that the child may not fail. So we actually choose tried and tested path because we want good for our children, but at times those things may not go well. Second reflection is that when we try to make everybody happy, we'll end up being unhappy. So it's very difficult to make everybody happy in life. So be your colleagues, your family members, or your friends. So one needs to do what is right. This is from my side, sir.
Thank you, Gurdeep. Anything you want to add?
No, I totally agree with Shalini ma'am. I think failure is good.
Good.
So
So,
we
and
can,
that's the
yeah,
key of
I was
learning. That's
thinking of
what learning
productive
is. I mean,
failure book
absolutely,
when we were
absolutely.
reading this, yeah, chapter.
Yeah. Because when you fail, you are actually exploring yourself, you are thinking more, you are working more, you're moving ahead. That's the
And
beauty
I
of
think then we are like more happy when we fail. It's not a suffering. It's not a suffering at all. We
you
are
learn to
exploring
compete
so
with
many
yourself.
things.
You learn to compete with yourself, and that's the only competition that matters.
Mm.
Outside yourself,
And
it should be collaboration. The competition has to be from within. And
yeah,
minute you can master the competition within, you will not have all these interpersonal problems. Now, what is interpersonal problem? Simple way to solve is that you compete with yourself and adapt. That's what it's saying. And you
mm.
find a way. And if you can find a way, you will never have an interpersonal problem. Bless you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank
Bye
you,
bye.
everyone.